Welcome back to NewsX World. I am Joshua Barnes. Let's first take a look at our top stories. Anti-government protesters in Jerusalem have called for an end to the war in Gaza as Israel's president says Hamas releasing hostages is the key to solving the Gaza war. Meanwhile, at least 40 people have reportedly been killed in Gaza, according to local health officials. US President Donald Trump has said that last week's job report was rigged, just like numbers prior to the presidential election. Trump's unsubstantiated claims comes after he fired the head of America's Labour Statistics Agency over the report. The Kremlin says that US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff's visit to Russia will be useful amid escalating tensions and a sanctions deadline, which has been imposed, with the US putting pressure on a Russia-Ukraine ceasefire. Meanwhile, Russia has urged caution over nuclear rhetoric after Donald Trump earlier announced that 2 nuclear submarines had been moved after tensions with former President Dmitry Medvedev. The Kremlin says everyone needs to be very, very careful. Iran says that accountability from the United States over strikes on its nuclear facilities as part of any future talks between the countries. Tensions have remained over Iran's nuclear program amid discussions on a potential nuclear deal. Talks between Cambodia and Thailand have begun in Malaysia as a fragile ceasefire holds after 5 days of fighting along the disputed border area. Dozens of deaths were reported, with hundreds of thousands of people displaced. South Africa has outlined support measures in response to US tariffs. The Minister of International Relations says South Africa is strengthening trade partnerships after the Trump administration's tariff action. And at least 76 people have died, with dozens missing after a boat carrying mostly Ethiopian migrants sank off Yemen, marking the largest tragedy on this dangerous sea route. But we start with some breaking news this hour as the Kremlin has confirmed that Russian President Vladimir Putin and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu are holding a phone conversation. This marks the second such phone call between the two in recent days after the veteran leaders discussed Syria and Iran last week. However, Israel has declined to provide further details on the call, and there are no details out from Moscow either. This, of course, amidst many aligned with Iran, the ongoing situation in Gaza, and other points of potential discussion as well. Joining us to cover this breaking news is Ali M. Abushbak, a Middle East researcher, joining us from Cairo. Ali, there are huge ramifications potentially from this conversation. Of course, US-Russian rhetoric has soured in recent times. The US and Israel are aligned. So how key could this conversation between Benjamin Netanyahu and Vladimir Putin be for a wide range of issues?
Thank you, Joshua. Despite there is no information about this conversation, and there is no one single media addressed what happened and about what they are discussing, but it's all about Iran, Syria and Iran, especially these countries. It was the significant alliance for Russia, and especially Russia has a militant based in Syria. So despite that, Witkoff, he visited the area and visited Israel on Thursday, and on Friday he visited Gaza, and despite they discussed the stuck issues in this area, we are suddenly heard about Benjamin Netanyahu. He talked to Vladimir Putin, and especially Vladimir Putin, he has a power and he has an impact in Iran as a significant allies for Iran. And I guess nowadays Benjamin Netanyahu he's looking for any victory, especially after the Israelis lambast for his policy with regard to the war in Gaza, and also the international community has condemning the Israelis Israelis interfaces in Syria, especially after the crisis with the Druze minority, and supporting the Druze that make it escalated the situation in Syria, and maybe it's deeply impacted the relation between the current regime, the new regime, and Israel. We heard during the visit of Donald Trump to Saudi Arabia about Syria. It's has a willing to sign an agreement and normalize the relation with Israel. And Ahmed al-Sharahi was clear with these things about the negotiation and talking or talking with Israel about a significant issue to reach to peace and to reach to normalize the relation between Israel. I guess after this crisis with the Druze and Israelis uh, invasion to Damascus and some significant sites in Syria has deeply impacted this kind of talk, and I guess it's impacted the negotiation between Syria current regime and Israel.
Yes.
I guess the conversation it's around these things, and maybe they are discussed about the future of relation between Russia and Israel. Especially, we know that Israel is facing the global isolation over the war in Gaza, and the outrage in global outrage has been increased and grow.
Yes, absolutely. Ali, if you do stay with us, we are going to head shortly to the situation in Gaza. But of course, that conversation between Netanyahu and Putin is something we will continue to monitor and bring you all the updates from it as we get them. But we now move on as Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has announced that he will convene his cabinet later this week to decide on the next steps in the war in Gaza. Speaking at a government meeting, Netanyahu said the Israeli military would be instructed on how to achieve three core objectives. That is, defeating Hamas, securing the release of hostages, and ensuring that Gaza no longer poses a threat to Israel. Let's listen in to the Israeli Prime Minister.
אנחנו צריכים להמשיך לעמוד יחד ולהילחם יחד כדי להשיג את מטרות המלחמה שהצבנו, את כולן. את הכרעת האויב, שחרור חטופינו, והבטחה שעזה לא תהווה יותר איום על ישראל. בהמשך השבוע אני אכנס לקבינט כדי להנחות את צה"ל כיצד להשיג את שלוש המטרות הללו, כולן בלי יוצא מן הכלל.
Well, this comes as in Jerusalem, Israelis have taken to the streets, staging demonstrations against the government and demanding an end to the war in Gaza. Well, thank you for staying with us, Ali. Of course, a couple of points here for us to touch on. Firstly, let's look at Benjamin Netanyahu's comments about a potential plan that will be spoken to his troops about. Of course, his aims, I've listed them, they've been the same since the start. He wants to disband and disarm Hamas. He wants the return of hostages and to make sure that no attack like October the 7th can happen again. What do you think that plan could potentially be for his troops?
First of all, Joshua, in Israeli community, there is a special. They are opposite the Israeli militant operation in Gaza, the Gazian's chariot, which start in May 2025 up to now. All the militant general, they are questioning what's the purpose of fighting in Gaza, and for the ground invasion of Gaza. Israel is sizing more than 75% of Gaza, and just only 15% has been remained. And also, Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to take a green light to invade Al-Mawasi and Deir al-Balah in south part of Gaza. This also Israeli community deeply criticized the aims of war, and most of the Israeli writer and most of the Israelis left wing, they are criticizing this operation, and they are demanding for explaining the purpose of the war, especially if Benjamin Netanyahu is arguing or pursuing to release the captive in Gaza or hostages. So most of the Israeli commander, they are warning Benjamin Netanyahu this completely sizing Gaza, it may pose the danger to the Israelis hostages. Hamas last 2 weeks released a footage that showing the miserable situation for the Israeli captive in the tunnel while he was digging a wall in tunnel. So that's increased the protest in Israel,
Yes.
especially about the situation of the Israeli captive. They are suffering like the Palestinians from the starvation and the famine. So that's increased the protest and also the lambast of Israel's government. Benjamin Netanyahu now he's in tough place while he's trying to buy a time about his government coalition, especially Smotrich and Ben Gvir, who both of them they are creating a pressure for Benjamin Netanyahu to continue the war in Gaza, while most of the Israelis community and ministers they are against the operation in Gaza. This is on one hand. On other hand, Joshua, I can the Witkoff visit to Israel and Gaza. Witkoff he met the family of Israelis captive and he confirmed that he and Benjamin Netanyahu they are working and dedicating their time to serve the issue. I mean to release the hostages. Hamas confirmed that it's ready to release the hostages in one time, but they have one condition to Israel to stop the war and for long-term truce between Gaza and Israel. Last week, the negotiation, the indirect talk between Hamas and Israel reached to the dead back. Unfortunately, we are waiting. Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to practice the pressure on Hamas. The same aim for...
Yes, Ali, I'm conscious of time and we do have another point to come to, but thank you for that insight. Please do stay with us as we move to a related topic, as Israel's President Isaac Herzog, speaking during a diplomatic visit to Lithuania, has said that the release of hostages held in Gaza is the key to resolving the severe humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip. Standing alongside the Lithuanian president, Herzog held up photos of hostages Rom Breslavsky and Evyatar David, both seen severely emaciated in recent videos released by Hamas and the Islamic Jihad. Herzog said the two hostages, including David, who has Lithuanian heritage, are in immediate life-threatening danger and that the world must not remain silent. Herzog also rejected claims that Israel is causing starvation in Gaza. Let's now listen to the Israeli president.
נוספים בעזה, אני זועק מכאן העולם כולו, אסור לעמוד מנגד. חייבים לראות כולם משוחררים בבית, זה המפתח לכל הפתרון של המשבר החמור במזרח התיכון ובעזה. חטופים וקורבנות של פשעים נוראים נגד היבשות. הדמעות המחקדות הללו במאוד עדות שישראל, בשעה שהיא דואגת לאספקה הומניטרית לעזה, הישראלים החפים מפשע שם במנהרות עוברים לעינוי נורא וכל זכויותיהם משתנות. וזה יתייחס לדברים בדריסי. אנחנו משקיעים מאמצים רבים מאוד בנושא ההומניטרית. ובעלייה בחוק הבינלאומי זה כבישי צד כמעט השבוע נכנסו 23,000 טון של אספקה הומניטרית לתוך עזה, ומאות משאיות, יש מאות משאיות שמחכות לחלוקה, והאו"ם לא מקדם את חלוקתן. אנחנו מעודדים על סנחות של סיוע הומניטרי מאוד גדול ומזמינים את כל המדינות.
Well, Ali, thank you for staying with us. I want to put it simply, do you think that the release of hostages, if Hamas does it, will end the war in Gaza?
Joshua, this is the Israeli propaganda. Hamas has released Al-Iskandar, the American Israeli, for free of cost without any, without any income for Palestinian, without releasing any Israelis, Palestinian prisoner in Israeli's jail. First, second, Hamas has committed for its obligation about the previous deal with Israel, releasing around more than 20 Israelis captive in Gaza, which Israel resumed suddenly the war and surprised the Palestinians by resume the war in March 2025. So if Hamas using the hostages as a backup card for its, otherwise if Hamas will going to release all the hostages without any guarantee for stop the war and for ceasefire in Gaza or for long-term truce, so there is nothing can stop Israel from invading Gaza and for killing the more civilians and for displace the civilians from Gaza, and which Israel demand to displace the civilians from Gaza to other country. And we have seen that in Israelis interview that Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump to departure the civilians of Gaza to other countries. So Hamas has no other choice. We are all think that releasing the hostages, and we are confirmed about releasing the hostages at one time, is the significant key to reach to ceasefire. But there is no guarantee from Israel, and we have a experience about 18th of March 2025 when Israel resumed the war without any reasons, while they were talking and they are negotiating in Qatar.
Ali, we have around a minute left. Of course, this war started on October the 7th, and that has seen hostilities get worse and worse. The situation in Gaza is horrific. The situation for families and loved ones of hostages in Israel is horrific. Is it time for everyone to come to a solution, and how do we get there?
The significant solution is, all the international community confirm Israel should be stop the war and going for a peace process, but with the Palestinian as a two-state solution between Israel and Palestinian as a significant solution as a contemporary time between Israel and Palestine. And also, Israel should be removed the restrict blockade in Gaza, because why Gaza? It's creating the chaos always. Since 2007, when Hamas hold the power in Gaza up to now, Israel had imposed a restrict blockade in Gaza, which prohibited the Palestinian for their right, like mobility, like interact with the international community, with the other countries. So that's creating the huge issue in Gaza, which make the Gaza.
Ali, unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you ever so much for joining us and providing an insight on an extremely difficult topic, one that we will continue to monitor both diplomatically and on the ground in Gaza. But moving on, Switzerland is preparing for what it calls a more attractive offer to the United States in a last-ditch effort to avoid a punishing 39% tariff imposed by President Donald Trump. The Swiss Federal Council confirmed on Monday it will continue negotiations with Washington, stating it aims to address US concerns while seeking to ease the growing tariff pressure. The nation was caught off guard when the White House announced the steep tariffs set to take effect this Thursday. Swiss President Karin Keller-Sutter has already met with US officials as sectors like chocolate, watchmaking and pharmaceuticals brace for impact. With rival economies like the European Union securing lower tariffs, Bern says Switzerland now faces an unfair disadvantage, and it's urging Washington to reconsider. Well, joining us to discuss the ramifications of these potential discussions and a new Switzerland-led conversation around tariff rates, Peter Cordillo, a chief market economist at Spartan Capital Securities, joining us live from New York. Peter, as always, a pleasure to have you on the programme. Let's look at this situation. Of course, a deal wasn't agreed, and then Switzerland hit with tariffs much higher than they were expecting. Do you think that discussions will take place and this deal will be lowered, or is this a lesson potentially to Switzerland that they should have got a deal done earlier?
No, I think it will. I think negotiations will come about, and I think that these hefty tariffs will be lowered. And I think that that's going to apply for the rest of the trading partners that have received higher tariffs. I think it's just a question of getting everyone back to the table and negotiating. And at the end, I think it will be resolved with lower tariffs. That's not to say that the tariffs may not still be hefty, but certainly not 39%. Or 40%, or in some cases even 50%. So I think, They are basically bargaining tools, of which the Trump administration and Trump himself has placed in order to get to more realistic tariffs that you know will likely cause higher inflation, but not destroy the trading partners' ability to export, and vice versa for the United States as well.
Yes, and Peter, of course, the goods that Switzerland is exporting, pharmaceuticals is a big one, and we know that the Trump administration is looking at infrastructure within the US to make more pharmaceuticals and looking at production. But other goods like chocolate and watches as well, more luxury items. Do you think this is at the top of Trump's agenda when he's looking at these deals, or is he potentially going to keep higher sanctions on Switzerland because of the goods that are being sold?
No, I think again, the deals will be reached, and sanctions will not probably be imposed or lifted somewhere along the line. It just doesn't make sense to, slap on high tariffs when the American consumer is going to pay the price of that with higher inflation. So the Trump administration, and I believe Trump knows this as well. And as I said, I think they're just bargaining tools. And in terms of sanctions, I mean, sanctions are placed and can be lifted, and sanctions not necessarily have the impact as levies do, that is directly on the consumer. So again, I think that it's just a matter of time before there will be negotiations that will come to some conclusion that will satisfy both sides.
Yes, Peter, do stay with us. We're going to move back over to North America as US President Donald Trump has called July's US jobs report rigged, accusing officials of manipulating data to favour Democrats. In a post on Truth Social, Trump said the jobs numbers were revised to downplay Republican success. He compared the changes to those made before the 2020 election. Trump announced he has fired the person responsible for the data and promised to appoint a strong replacement. He claimed the adjustments were made to create fake political numbers. The Labour Department has not yet responded. The revised report showed lower job growth than initially reported, sparking fresh political debates over the figures. Well, Peter, thank you for staying with us. Trump calling these figures fake, saying the revised numbers aren't realistic, and of course firing the head of the organisation that has created them. Is this Trump not being happy with what he's seen, or is this potentially something at play like the accusations Trump is making?
Well, let me say this. Most macro indicators are revised, especially the labor numbers. They are constantly revised because a lot of it is just based on survey. Now, Trump accuses them of being fake. Well, I don't think they're fake. It happens all the time. It happened under the Biden administration, where they were revised downward with a huge amount, and so it happens all the time. I think Trump seems to want to have the numbers in his favor. Well, it doesn't work that way, and so the fact that he fired the statistical individual who was in charge of it, not necessarily is alarming, because he'll obviously replace someone else, and perhaps maybe the next person might want to conform to his wishes. But you can only do that so much. Eventually, the true numbers, are manifested either one way or another. So I don't put too much into that. And again, like I said, these numbers are constantly open for revision. Not only the labor departments, the GDP numbers, and many other numbers, even retail numbers. In
Yes.
fact, all major indicators are always accompanied by revisions. So, I think it's just a moment of trying to maybe send a message to the markets. Oh no, the economy is doing very well. Well, some of the economic data that we've gotten certainly doesn't point that way. Could that change for the better? Of course, absolutely. Could it change for the worse? Of course.
Peter, very briefly before we let you go, we've heard Trump before calling things fake news when it doesn't support his agenda or goes against him. This is another set of data which he's called rigged. You're in New York. What is the public perception of Trump calling out information that doesn't suit him and sometimes pushing information when it does?
Well, I don't know what the public feelings about it. I would imagine his supporters brush it off. But if you read some of the commentary that's been published over the weekend within the financial media and surveys, most economists basically say, you just can't have it your way. If the numbers are what they are, they are what they are. So, and I think, even the market seems to be suggesting that. Look, on Friday we came down hefty, and now today we're basically regaining most of those losses. So I think the market is getting used to the Trump rhetoric and his administration's rhetoric.
Peter, thank you ever so much for joining us on both of those topics. We move to South America now, and in Argentina, President Javier Milei has officially vetoed legislation passed by Congress that would have increased pension payments and expanded protections for individuals with disabilities. The veto announced on Monday had been anticipated since last month and comes just ahead of crucial midterm elections this October. Milei, known for his libertarian economic stance, defended the move by emphasising the need for fiscal responsibility, stating there is no money. The presidency criticised lawmakers for approving the bills without identifying how they would be funded. While Milei's administration has made strides in curbing triple-digit inflation, his austerity measures continue to spark debate over their social impact. Congress still holds the power to overturn the veto, though doing so would require a significant majority. Well, joining us to discuss this latest announcement from Argentina, of course in the grips of economic difficulties, Anushka Saraswat, an international relations expert and scholar, joining us live from New Delhi. Anushka, thank you for your time. This is, of course, an interesting conversation to be had. Austerity measures that are in place in the face of triple-digit inflation. Is this Javier Milei in between a rock and a hard place, or do you think his stance is maybe too strong?
Yes, exactly. Thank you for having me here. So if we look at President Milei's veto in the pension scheme in Argentina, I think it is a reflection of how they would like to balance the global economic landscape currently and the inflation that they are seeing on the domestic level. So if we look at it from a very legal perspective, of course, it is constitutional. But if we see it from the perspective of signaling, then Argentina would like to signal to the partners in the West that it is trying to fight the inflation at home. And this is why one of the measures is to veto the pension scheme. While this is a matter of protecting the rights of elderly people, which I think a lot of Western countries are dealing with, and many economies in the global South and South America. But this is where they are trying to meet the obligations with the IMF and the international macroeconomic landscape that we are seeing currently. And if we go back to the turmoils that have been happening since the COVID-19 pandemic, and how South America in particular and global South in general is dealing with such problems, then it is one of those shock waves and one of those impacts where where a scheme that either way would have benefited the elderly people, protected the rights of many families and older people in the global south, it has led to probably choosing the macroeconomic stability more
Yes.
over how they would like to deal with the pension schemes for the elderly people.
Anushka, as we bring an end to the discussion and the programme as well, we have seen protests in Argentina over the actions of Javier Milei and his government. Do you think that we can expect similar moves after this veto?
Yes, it is very possible that we could expect similar vetoes from President Milei and Argentina, because I think this is something that we are seeing on the global level in the European countries, in the West, in the global South. South America is not an exception. So it's a part of how the countries are trying to respond to the global economic shocks that are sent because of inflation, because of the rise of governments that might be leaning towards the right, and some are even leaning towards the far right. So, as an IR expert and also as a lawyer, I would like to tell you that it is a balance between macroeconomic stability and doing something which would be rights-based. So definitely such schemes could be vetoed, not just in Argentina, but in many other global South countries, because the shocks, because of conflicts, because of a pandemic, and because of all the regional instability that we are seeing currently, this is definitely going to pressure the governments
Yes.
to pick up macroeconomic stability over inflation, and that is why we might say that rights are compromised.
Anushka, thank you ever so much for your time and insight. That is all we have time for. We'll be back shortly with more of your latest international news. Thank you.